My body's too big, human. I'm not breeding material. But he held her, loved her, and got her pregnant.
The air burned. It wasn't just hot, it was dangerous. The kind of dry, chemical heat that seared lungs and left a taste of copper in the back of your throat. Carnix, 7 didn't make it easy on anyone. Sunlight cut through the haze like a blade, bouncing off rusted scrap heaps and lighting up the wide, cracked flats in a blistered orange glare. In the distance, the tall skeletons of abandoned terror rigs leaned like they were ready to collapse. Oscar Crane squinted behind his dust goggles and adjusted the strap on his filtration mask. He checked the readings on his wrist scanner: humidity, temperature, air toxicity. All borderline. Not lethal, but not safe for long exposure either. He muttered to himself and kept walking. Oscar was 41, once a planetary biosystems engineer based on Europa Prime. Clean halls, regulated labs, predictive models. Then came the breach. A pathogen leaked in from an off-world sample. His wife died inside a sealed dome, and he was the one who signed off on the chamber's final lockdown. That was 5 years ago. Now, he drifted contract to contract, never staying long, mostly choosing the worst assignments, the ones no one else wanted. Carnix, 7 fit the bill. Remote, partially collapsed infrastructure, and populated mostly by rejects from failed breeding programs, displaced miners, and crew too poor to leave. His current task: assess the viability of reactivating the Terra hubs around Red Verge, a long-abandoned district turned unofficial salvage zone. He'd been walking grid pattern scans for 6 days when he spotted the movement. It was subtle, a flick of silver, barely visible against the dull gray wall of the salvage pit. He paused on the ridge and crouched low, brushing dust from the scope of his monocular. There, in the trench below, a woman. Tall, violet-skinned, kneeling beside a wrecked junction box. Her arm was inside a corroded conduit panel. She was working. He adjusted the zoom. She wasn't dressed for protection. Her wrap was little more than a strip of aged fabric, clinging to her upper chest, stained from heat and old grease. Her legs were wrapped in torn thermal cloth, bandaged with wire in places. Her back was broad, muscled. Her long white hair had been pulled into a loose knot, but strands clung to her slick shoulders. A branded scar, precise and angular, was burned just below her shoulder blade. A cast mark, Feline script. Unfit. Oscar's stomach turned. He climbed down the slope slowly, announcing his presence with deliberate footfalls. No sudden movements. People didn't survive long out here by being trusting. She tensed immediately. Her body shifted, alert. But she didn't run. She didn't even turn. "You're pushing too much current into the secondary coil," he said from a few meters off. "It's going to blow the charge link." A beat of silence. "I know what I'm doing," she replied. Her voice was rough-edged but steady. He stepped closer, careful not to tower over her. "I'm not here for your salvage. I'm here to check grid lines." He held up his scanner, display glowing faintly. "Oscar Crane, engineer." She turned then, slowly. Her eyes were pale gray, not glassy or dull, but sharp, watching him for signs of mockery, of threat. Her face was strong, no makeup, no frills. She was breathing hard. Sweat streaked down her throat. Her lips were cracked. He didn't look away. She reached for a flask by her side. Empty. Without a word, he offered his own canister. She hesitated. "It's clean," he said. "Filtered." She took it, not with gratitude, but with the grim necessity of someone who's learned not to say thank you for the bare minimum. She drank fast, coughed once, then handed it back. Vari. The name landed heavily. Feline women rarely offered names to strangers. He nodded. "You from the breeding blocks?" Her jaw flexed. "Used to be." Oscar didn't press. He already knew the rest. The Feline caste system measured every centimeter of a female's body. Vari was almost 7 feet tall, thick in the hips, heavy in the chest and thighs. Clearly fertile, but not by their standards. Too big, too unruly. So they discarded her. "I thought they culled the unfit out of Sector 8 last year," he said quietly. "They did. I ran. That was it. No more details. Just a flat fact, offered without apology." She turned back to the conduit. Oscar watched her work in silence. She wasn't just fiddling. Her movements were practiced, efficient. Whatever education she'd been denied socially, she'd taught herself with her hands. You fix the secondary regulator with a pulse mirror, he observed. That's not easy. It's not hard if you don't rush it. You could work in mainline repair. They don't hire people like me. He didn't argue. He just crouched and started running his own scans nearby. Vari said nothing more, and Oscar respected that. She let him stay. That was enough. The next day, she was still there. So was he. She barely looked at him when he arrived, just tossed him a fried connector pin and said, might still be good. Heat fused, but the coil's clean. He caught it midair and nodded. It was the start of something. Not friendship. Not yet. But not nothing. They settled into a rhythm. Midday work, shared rations, separate silence. But she stopped flinching when he passed her tools. She started asking for materials by name. She let him sit closer. On the fifth night, the storm came fast. Red verge storms weren't like anything Oscar had seen on other colonies. The wind didn't whistle, it howled. The sky turned brown, then black. Dust blinded optics. Electrostatic surges danced across metal. You had maybe 3 minutes to find shelter before your skin started peeling. Oscar had been logging terrain in the southern trench when his scanner crackled with the alert. He bolted toward the nearest shelter, a grounded skimmer wreck used by salvagers as a storm refuge. He slid the panel shut, breathing hard. Then he heard pounding. He turned. Vari, slamming her fist on the exterior. Her eyes wild, hair streaked with sand and grit. He yanked the door open and pulled her inside. She collapsed just inside the hatch, coughing, covered in filth. Her skin glowed faintly in the low light, more from heat than from health. Her wrap was soaked through, clinging tightly to her body. You should have been closer to shelter, he said, handing her a filtered towel. You think I planned it? She snapped, then took the towel. She wiped her face, then her arms, slowly regaining control. Her breathing evened out. The space inside the skimmer was tight, barely room to sit side by side. But they didn't speak. Just sat there, listening to the wind tear at the metal outside. After a while, Vari broke the silence. You keep coming back. Why? Oscar looked at her, steady. Because you shouldn't be out here alone. You think I'm weak? No. I think it's dangerous. And I don't want to find your body under a pile of scrap one day. That stopped her. She watched him for a long moment, as if trying to decide what kind of man he really was. Then, quietly, she said, they said I was too big. Not fit for the breeding halls. Said I'd never carry properly. Never attract a bondmate. Call me excess. Deadweight. Oscar didn't reply immediately. He let the silence carry the weight. She didn't look at him. I tell myself I don't care. That I'm glad to be free of them. But some days, I feel like I'm rotting out here. Like maybe they were right. He reached out slowly, deliberately, and took her hand. Rough calluses. Dirt under her nails. But warm. You're not broken, he said, voice quiet. You're surviving. That's what matters. She didn't cry. She didn't speak again. But she didn't let go of his hand either. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, for the first time in years, something held steady. A moment not built on fear or duty or shame. Just two people breathing the same air, sharing the same quiet space. Tomorrow would bring more work, more danger. But for now, this was enough. The storm passed after 4 hours, leaving a thin film of red grit on every surface. The air was clearer, cooler, but charged. Static snapped faintly through the worn fabric of Oscar's suit as he pushed the hatch open and climbed out. Behind him, Vari stood silently, her silhouette large against the dim light, her arms folded tightly across her chest. She hadn't spoken since the storm died down. She didn't need to. Oscar didn't ask if she was okay. He knew the answer. She'd survived another storm, another day on Carnix 7. But surviving wasn't the same as living. He recognized that difference now. In her posture, in the way she avoided eye contact, in the silence that grew heavier the longer it stretched. They made their way across the salvage zone in silence. Dawn hadn't broken yet, but the faint green edge of planetary orbit was creeping up from the east. Oscar's boots crunched over glass-fused soil. Vari moved beside him with careful, grounded steps, her legs covered in new grime. Her sash had torn in the storm. She didn't try to fix it. The wind had stripped her down to the basics, just the wrappings and a short thermal undershirt, sleeveless and damp with sweat. Her skin glistened in the half-light, but her expression remained unreadable. At the base of a broken loader mech, they stopped. "This is where I sleep," she said flatly. Oscar looked down. An old utility pod, long gutted, converted into a crude shelter. One emergency blanket, a cracked thermal coil barely hanging on by a power loop, a bucket for waste, a crate for storage. She carved out a life from nothing. He hesitated, then crouched beside the makeshift door. "You built this from scratch." Her tone was even. "Nobody gave me anything." He nodded. "Do you want to come back to Dome 17? It's not much, but the regulator works and there's real heat." Vari shook her head. "I'm not staying in a dome. They check ID logs, scan markers. I'm flagged. You bring me in, and someone will ask questions." Oscar leaned back, exhaling slowly. He understood now what she hadn't said before. She wasn't just thrown out of her caste. She was officially listed. Tracked. If the breeding council still had claim over her DNA class, they might want her back, especially if her biology had proven viable in exile. And on a planet where caste-broken women were considered unsanctioned liabilities, Vari wasn't just discarded. She was illegal. He stared at the dirt for a long moment, then looked up. "What happens if they find you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her crate and pulled out a small metal capsule. She turned it over in her palm, then pressed the seal. Inside was a medship, old model. Personalized. "They'll scan this. If it still pings the original registry, they'll reclaim me. Send me off-world to the seed programs. If I'm lucky, I'll get reassigned. If not," she shrugged, "they'll say I died in a riot somewhere." Oscar took the chip carefully, rolled it between his fingers, then snapped it in half and dropped the pieces into his pouch. "No one's scanning that again." Vari looked at him sharply, her lips parting slightly. Her voice dropped. "Why?" He stood. "Because you helped me fix the conduit, and I don't like bullies." The moment sat between them, long, heavy. Vari's jaw tightened again, but not in anger. More like confusion. She wasn't used to being defended. She wasn't used to anyone making decisions that benefited her. "You could get flagged too," she said. "I've already been flagged once," he replied. "Didn't stop me from living." She turned away. "You don't even know me." "Not yet." Oscar walked off without another word. He didn't sleep that night. Back in his assigned dome, he sat beside the heater core, running diagnostics and overlaying circuit maps from the salvage reports, but his thoughts kept drifting. She hadn't cried. Not once. Not even when she showed him the chip. She hadn't begged for help, hadn't offered anything in return. She just let him see. And somehow, that was worse. She was used to being invisible, used to not asking because she expected the answer would be no. He remembered her saying it, "I'm not breeding material," as if the words had been carved into her ribs. Not just rejected, devalued. Like her body was some broken tool her people no longer needed. But he'd seen her strength, her precision, her intelligence, the way she solved wiring issues he hadn't even noticed. There was nothing defective about her. The next morning, he brought food. Nothing fancy. Rations, half a protein loaf, a small thermal flask of tea. She opened the crate when he knocked. "You didn't have to come back," she said. He handed her the food. "I know." She took it, this time with her hand brushing against his. "Thanks," she muttered. They sat outside, eating in silence. She picked at the bread like she didn't trust it at first, then ate slowly, carefully. No hoarding, no rushing, just focused chewing. Oscar didn't interrupt. When she finished, she licked the crumbs from her fingers, then looked away quickly, ashamed. "I haven't had that in months," she said. "Ration drops stopped coming out here. They stopped once the breeding projects moved sector bases. No one bothers with the outer verge anymore." He leaned back against the mech wreckage. "And yet, you're still here." She looked at him, tired. "Where would I go?" He didn't have a good answer. They spent the day repairing a collapsed energy coil in the salvage yard. Vari climbed the frame easily, despite her size, balancing on rusted girders with practiced care. At one point, Oscar glanced up from the ground and caught sight of her silhouette against the sun. Long legs, defined calves, dirt-smeared skin. She didn't move like someone ashamed of her body. She moved like someone who had survived by knowing exactly how much space she took up. That night, she came to him. No preamble. He was sealing up the dome when the outer hatch hissed, and she stepped through. Covered in dust, arms bare, eyes down. She stood by the door, uncertain. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she said quietly. "Not for sex. Just, I don't want the silence." Oscar nodded and moved aside. She sat near the thermal core, cross-legged. He passed her a blanket. She didn't speak for a long time. Then, in a voice barely audible, "They said if I ever bore a child without authorization, they'd sterilize me. That the gene mix would be corrupt. That I was waste." He turned to her, his voice firm. "You're not waste." She met his eyes. "You don't know what you're saying. I know enough to see someone who's still standing after being thrown away. That's not waste. That's strength." Her shoulders dropped slightly. She didn't cry, but when she lay down beside him later, her hand found his under the blanket, just holding. And for the first time, she fell asleep before him. Oscar stared at the ceiling, listening to her breath. He didn't know what would come next, but something had changed. For both of them. She lay still for a long time. Oscar thought she had fallen asleep until her fingers moved, first across his chest, then lower, hesitant at first, as if expecting to be stopped. When he didn't react, she exhaled, a long, shaky breath. Her hand flattened against his ribs, then slid down to his waist. Her body followed. Vari moved above him, slowly, deliberately, her knees straddling his hips with a grace that felt unpracticed but natural. Her thighs were thick, powerful. Her skin, violet and soft under the dome's flickering light, glowed where the heat of their bodies met. She didn't hide her size now. She embraced it. Oscar looked up at her. She was massive over him, her shoulders wide, breasts heavy, the curve of her waist flowing into hips that dwarfed his own frame. And yet, nothing about her movement was clumsy. She controlled her weight with surprising care, every shift of her body measured and precise. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I've never done this before. Not like this, where it was my choice." Oscar rested his hands on her hips, thumbs stroking slow circles. "You don't have to rush." "I don't want to rush," she said, more firmly. "I want to remember this. Every part of it." She adjusted her knees, settling more fully onto him. The sensation made her gasp, deep and sharp, like a jolt of heat spreading through her belly. He felt it too, the tight, wet slide of her body against his. Her inner walls gripped him slowly, involuntarily, as if reacting with instinct before thought. Vari rocked once. Her breath caught. Her size gave her leverage. Each movement was deep, controlled, grinding rather than bouncing. She moved with strength but not aggression, rolling her hips with aching precision. Her hands braced on his chest as she started a slow rhythm, her eyes fluttering shut, mouth parted in wordless release. Oscar didn't speak. He just watched her, watched the way her body responded to his, how her weight settled around him like a shield, like she was building something sacred between them with every motion. She leaned forward, lowering herself until her breast pressed against his chest. Her hands slid under his shoulders, her hips never stopping their slow, deliberate roll. The pressure, the heat, the wet sound of their bodies moving, everything became sharper, more focused. And then she whispered, voice cracking under the pressure, "Don't look away. I want to be seen." Oscar reached up, cupping her face. "I see you." She groaned against his throat, a sound of pleasure, of release. Her movements became more desperate now, still slow, but deeper, grinding down against him as if trying to root herself in the moment. The weight of her, the fullness of her hips pressing down. Oscar had never felt anything like it. She overwhelmed his senses. She consumed him, not like a storm, but like gravity, pulling everything he was into her, anchoring him. Vari began to tremble. Her thighs shook with each roll. Her breath turned ragged. Her hands dug into his back, and her mouth dropped open against his skin. She came quietly, but fully. A single broken moan escaped her throat, deep and guttural, as her whole body tensed and then collapsed, shivering around him. She didn't pull away. She didn't move at all. She just stayed, pressed to him, hips still twitching in slow aftershocks, legs locked tight around his waist. When her breathing slowed, she whispered into his chest, "I like being on top. I like feeling you beneath me." Oscar's voice was hoarse. "You were incredible." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "I didn't think anyone would ever make me feel like that. I didn't think I'd want anyone to." He stroked her hair, fingers weaving through the wet strands. "Then I'm honored." She smiled. Faint, barely there, but it was real. And when she finally rolled off and tucked herself against his side, draping one heavy leg across his body, it didn't feel like retreat. It felt like home. Morning arrived slowly on Carnix 7. The dome lights were on a manual cycle, not synced with orbit rotation, but even the artificial glow couldn't mimic the soft calm that came after a night like that. Oscar woke first. Vari was still sleeping beside him, her body half draped over his, leg heavy across his thigh, one arm curled against her chest. Her breathing was slow, deep calm. Her skin was warm to the touch, bare, open, unguarded. He didn't move. Not right away. Last night had changed something, not just between them, but in her. He could see it now in the way she let herself remain so close. The way she didn't pull away in the aftermath. There was no panic, no regret. Only exhaustion, relief, and maybe, he hoped, trust. He carefully shifted out from under her, moving slow to not disturb her sleep. She murmured faintly, but didn't wake. He stood, pulled on his work trousers, and stepped to the far corner of the dome to start the kettle. The night echoed through him in flashes, her body rising over his, the way she held herself, took control, let herself be seen. Her size had never once felt too much. It had been grounding, consuming, right? She hadn't just wanted to be touched. She had wanted to be in control of it. That distinction had mattered. Oscar ran a hand over his face, trying to push the emotion back down. He wasn't used to feeling this exposed. Not anymore. A soft voice broke the silence. "You didn't leave." He turned. Vari sat up slowly, blanket wrapped around her chest. Her silver-white hair was loose around her shoulders, tangled and wild. Her eyes were steady, cautious but clear. He smiled quietly. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere." She shifted to the edge of the mat, planting her feet on the ground. The blanket slipped lower, revealing the heavy curve of her waist and thighs, the stretch of bruises over her side. She didn't flinch or cover herself. Oscar stepped closer, handing her a tin cup of warm tea. She took it with both hands and murmured, "Thank you." They drank in silence for a while, watching the dome's heat coils hum. Outside, faint dust hissed against the metal, just enough to remind them of where they were, of what could still go wrong. Then, without looking at him, she said, "I'm late." Oscar glanced at her, confused for a second. "My cycle," she clarified. "A full phase late. It's never happened before. Not once." He froze. Her fingers tightened around the cup. "I tracked it like a religion in the breeding block," she said quietly. They monitored everything. If a girl went 2 days off, she got put under observation. We were expected to be predictable, reproducible. Her voice caught. "I never once was. Not even with their hormones. They call me a dud. Said I'd never take." She looked up at him now, finally meeting his eyes. "But I felt something change. Last night. Or maybe before that. I can't explain it. I just know." Oscar didn't speak. He sat beside her, placing his hand lightly over hers. "Do you think it's mine?" he asked, not accusing, just quiet. "Steady. I haven't been with anyone else," she said simply. "And I didn't think I could until now." His stomach twisted. Not with fear, not even shock, but something bigger, something heavier. "Do you want this?" he asked. She looked away. Her voice dropped. "I don't know. I wasn't supposed to want anything. Wanting things just made everything harder. But last night, with you, it didn't feel like survival. It felt like choice." Oscar nodded. His voice stayed even. Then we deal with this as a choice. Together. Vari's mouth trembled slightly, as if she wasn't sure whether to believe him. I'm not going to disappear, he said. I know you're scared, but I'm still here. She leaned into him slowly, resting her head against his shoulder. They sat like that until the kettle clicked off. By midday, they had returned to the salvage yard. There were still responsibilities. Oscar had TerraHub systems to finish evaluating, and Vari knew how to patch the East Grid quicker than any crew he'd worked with. They worked side by side, passing tools, checking readouts, calibrating failed conduits. For the first time, it felt like they were part of the same rhythm. But peace on Carnix 7 didn't last. It started with a distant rumble. At first, Oscar thought it was another storm. But the sky didn't shift. The air didn't thicken. No lightning. No static buildup. Then they heard the engines. A skiff. Light class, single pod. Painted black with cobalt trim. Not a miner. Not a salvage crew. Vari straightened beside him. Feline Directorate, she said under her breath. I recognized the markings. Oscar's mind jumped. They're doing scans? They've started hitting outer districts, checking for runaways. Especially women who were discarded, but still of childbearing age. Her eyes were suddenly sharper. Alert. Already searching for cover. She moved fast, back into the trench network behind the power array. Oscar followed. They crouched beneath the shadows of an old scaffold, listening. The skiff hovered closer, low to the ground. There were voices now, amplified, barking orders. A search team, 2 or 3 at most, judging by the sound. Standard directorate behavior. Minimal personnel, maximum intimidation. They'll carry biometric sweepers, Vari said. Even if the chip is gone, they might catch traces of prior scan logs. Oscar thought fast. Can they detect human DNA mix? She hesitated. If they're running gestational traces, maybe. If they have reason to suspect, they'll test. And if they find a Feline female carrying unauthorized cross-species offspring, she didn't need to finish. Oscar stood. We need to get you out of here. I'm not leaving you, she said instantly. I'm not staying behind, he countered. But if they scan me, they won't see you. You're not registered in my logs. If I distract them, you'll be flagged. Better me than you and a child. Her eyes burned. She stepped forward suddenly, pressing her palm to his chest. No, she said. We don't split up. His hand covered hers. I know a way out, he said. South Ridge. There's a geothermal waste shaft. Old Smuggler Tunnel connects to the skiff yards. We use it. Tonight. She nodded, slow. Then, softer, if I'm pregnant. I want to keep it. Just so you know. Oscar didn't flinch. Good, he said. They didn't say anything else. Because from that moment forward, everything became about escape. And about survival, as two. Not one. The night came fast. Carnix 7 had no moons. Just a sky full of dead satellites and broken rigs reflecting cold starlight. Oscar stood near the supply crate behind Dome 17, stuffing rations and thermal packs into a scavenged duffel. His hands moved with precision, but his mind ran ahead, mapping paths, risks, worst-case outcomes. Vari stood watch at the edge of the clearing, her silhouette sharp against the rust-lit skyline. She had wrapped her body in a stitch coat Oscar had salvaged weeks ago, stitched from old worker uniforms and heat-shielded tarps. It didn't fit perfectly. Her broad shoulders stretched the seams. The sleeves stopped above her forearms. But she didn't complain. She was watching for patrols and listening for the sound of engines, boots, voices. She barely spoke the entire evening. Oscar approached quietly, slipping the pack over one shoulder. We move now, before the first scan cycle. Vari gave a single nod. They crossed the salvage field in silence. The ground underfoot was loose with dry grit, metal shards, broken polyglass. They stuck to the shadows, weaving between wrecks and broken skimmer frames, staying low. Every sound felt louder in the quiet. Vari's footsteps, heavy but measured. Oscar's breath tightening every time her pace slowed. About 15 minutes in, she stopped near a cracked cooling silo, one hand pressed to her lower abdomen. Oscar turned instantly. You okay? She didn't answer right away. just nodded slowly. I think I'm just feeling it more tonight, she said, voice low. Oscar moved to her side. You mean? She cut him off. Not pain, just a weight. Like my body's already changing. He looked at her, this tall, powerful woman made even more so by the quiet vulnerability in her eyes. We'll find safety, he said. We'll get through this. She didn't say anything, just kept walking. They reached the old fence line by the geothermal stack an hour later. The metal posts were half-eaten by corrosion, and most of the wire mesh had collapsed. Beyond it, the southern ridge sloped down into dark terrain, pocked with blast craters, collapsed machinery, and a faint thermal shimmer rising from the vents. Oscar pulled out the old access map and checked it under low light. There, he said, that's service hatch, about 200 meters down. It'll be covered, but I know the latch release. They made it halfway before the sound hit. Boots, voices, flashlights, a search party. Closer than expected. Vari cursed under her breath. Oscar grabbed her hand and yanked her toward a ditch beside a rusted crane mount. They dropped low, bodies pressed into the slope, hearts racing. Two figures passed no more than 10 meters away. Male, armored, one scanning with a beam array. They spoke in clipped Thelene dialect. Sector clear. Moving east, no signs of civilian presence. Vari barely breathed. The guards moved on. Oscar whispered, come on. Now. They scrambled up the slope, keeping low until they reached the side of a heat-warped maintenance node, half buried under slag rock. Oscar dropped the pack, ripped off the hatch cover, and reached inside. The lock was rusted, but it gave with pressure. He pulled it open, revealing a narrow tunnel, barely shoulder width. Deep and dark. Vari stared into it. That's small. You'll fit. I wasn't asking. He smirked despite everything. Vari climbed in first. Her broad frame scraped the sides, but she moved with practiced strength, hands bracing against the tunnel walls, legs pushing herself forward. Oscar followed close behind, sliding the hatch shut behind them. Inside, the air was thick with heat and dust. The tunnel curved downward, lit only by the occasional flicker of red from old utility strips. The path was uneven, sloped, filled with loose debris and broken pipe fittings. They crawled for what felt like forever. Eventually, the tunnel widened into a cavern chamber, once a pump access node, now hollow and flooded with warm vapor. Oscar dropped into it and looked around. We can rest here, he said. 5 minutes. Vari nodded, sitting heavily against the wall. Sweat gleamed on her forehead. She stripped off the coat, revealing her undershirt clinging to her chest and sides. She was breathing hard. You sure you're okay? He asked. She looked at him. I'm pregnant, not fragile. Then, softer, but yes. I'm just tired. He knelt beside her. Do you regret last night? He asked suddenly, voice quieter than intended. She blinked. No. Oscar exhaled. I need to know. You were in control. You chose it. I don't want. I chose you, she said firmly. Not just the moment. You. Then her voice faltered just slightly. I never thought I'd say that. Not to anyone. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers. I'm honored. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away. They stayed like that for a while. The air was hot, but not unbearable. The silence was safe. When they finally rose to keep moving, she pressed her hand to her belly once more. This time, she smiled. Let's go, she said. We're not just running. We're going somewhere now. Oscar nodded, and for the first time in a long time, so did he. The tunnel narrowed again after the chamber, angling downward into a serpentine path cut between the geothermal bedrock. The air thickened with mineral steam, sour, sulfuric, heavy in the lungs. Every few meters, a burst valve hissed or a sealing pipe dripped scalding condensation onto the floor below. Most people would have turned back. Vari kept moving. Her shoulders scraped the upper supports more than once. Her thighs barely fit through certain bends, but she never complained. Oscar followed close, one hand ready at her lower back, his eyes flicking between her steps and the brittle overhead supports. She didn't stumble, but her breathing grew tighter. You okay? He asked, voice low. I can keep going, she replied. Just don't stop. But she slowed. Oscar noticed it. The way she used the wall more often to brace, the slight favoring of her left leg. The pressure of carrying herself plus something new growing inside her. Even she hadn't yet admitted how fast the changes were coming. But her body was speaking for her now. They reached a junction node marked with rusted thelene glyphs. Oscar checked the faded map from his wristband. Left tunnel leads to the south shaft, he said. Another hour, maybe less. Vari nodded. Sweat soaked her shirt at the back. She was flushed, not just from heat. He opened the hatch, and the floor gave out. A rotten grate, half buried in slag, collapsed under her foot as she stepped forward. Her leg dropped. The rest of her body followed, too fast to catch. Oscar lunged, grabbed her by the wrist with both hands, anchoring himself against the sidewall. Hold on, he shouted. Her other hand scrabbled at the edge, nails clawing metal. The space below was dark, no visible bottom. I've got you, he grunted. She didn't scream, didn't panic. Her body strained, heavy, slick with heat and fear. Her weight was immense, but he didn't let go. His arms burned, muscles locked. With a growl of effort, he dragged her upward inch by inch until her hips hit the edge of the pipe. She pushed, he pulled, and finally she slid free, crashing into him as they both fell back onto the tunnel floor. They lay there in a heap, gasping. Vari rolled off him and stared at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling. I almost. You didn't, he said, voice raw. I had you. She didn't move, but she placed both hands over her lower stomach, protective, instinctive. I felt it, she whispered. In that moment, something small, shifting, inside me. Oscar sat upright. Dirt coated his arms. His shirt was torn. It's okay. You're okay. She looked over at him, eyes sharp. No, listen to me. I felt it. This isn't just theory anymore. It's not just timing. It's real. Oscar nodded. Then Vari's voice cracked for the first time. And I'm scared. He reached for her, pulled her in slowly, held her until the shaking in her shoulders stopped. She buried her face into his chest, silent. No sobs, just silent, hot breath and clenched fists. I can't go back to being livestock, she said eventually. That's what they'll call me if they find out, if they know there's a viable embryo. They won't care if it's yours. They'll test it, slice it, use it, then erase me. They won't touch you, he said. You don't know that. He looked at her then, really looked. You're right. I don't, but I'll kill to make sure it doesn't happen. I'll die if I have to. She stared at him like she didn't know whether to hit him or kiss him. And then, softly, she laughed. Once. Dry. No one's ever said that to me before. Not and meant it. I mean it. She leaned into him again, lips brushing his neck. Tell me something true, she whispered. About you. He hesitated. My wife, he said. 5 years ago. Europa Prime. Containment breach in our facility. I sealed the door with her inside. Vari went still. I followed procedure. There wasn't time. She was exposed. I stayed on comms with her until the end. I didn't even cry at the funeral. Vari's hand moved to his chest, slow and firm. You live like someone waiting to be punished, she said. Maybe. Don't. He turned to her. Why not? Because I need someone who chooses to survive now. Not just endure. That stopped him cold. Then he nodded. They sat in silence again for a while. Later, as they continued down the tunnel, she slipped her hand into his and didn't let go. When they finally reached the end shaft, Oscar Pride opened the emergency maintenance hatch and climbed the last few meters to the surface. He pushed it open carefully, checking the wind. Cool. Quiet. No lights. Safe for now. He turned, reached back down, and lifted Vari through. She emerged slowly, gasping the fresh air, blinking at the starlight above the ridge. We made it, she said. Almost. He smiled. There's a dockyard 3 kilometers east. Unmarked. I know someone with a skiff. And if they're not there, then we find another way. Vari stood there, the wind tugging at her loose shirt, her hair wild around her shoulders. She turned to him, face unreadable. Then let's start walking, human. He fell in a step beside her. And together, Under the broken sky of Carnix 7, they ran toward the only thing left worth running for. A life not dictated by survival, but by choice. The ridge was sharp and dry beneath their boots, the soil baked into broken plates by years of exposure and collapse. Wind cut sideways across the slope, picking up grit and stinging their faces. Carnix 7 didn't care that they were escaping. The planet wanted them broken, blistered, exhausted. Oscar walked ahead, shielding Vari from the worst of the gusts. She said nothing at first. Her steps were steady, but slower now. Her breath came shorter. Sweat streaked down the sides of her neck, soaking the collar of her shirt. She moved like someone pushing beyond the red line and refusing to stop. Oscar turned back. "You need to rest." "We don't have time," she said, but her voice was tight. "You're burning too fast," he replied. "Sit." 10 minutes. She stopped, only because she couldn't go another step without doing so. He helped her down beside an overturned skimmer, hull half buried in the rock. The metal radiated residual heat. She leaned back against it and closed her eyes. "I'm fine," she muttered. "Just too hot." He knelt beside her and pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. Still slick with sweat, but not burning. Her pulse was fast, but steady. She was pushing herself harder than she ever had. Oscar took a ration bar from his pouch, snapped it in half, and handed it to her. "Eat," he said. She took it, bit down, chewed slowly. Her fingers trembled slightly. Not fear, fatigue. Her voice came quiet. "I wasn't built for escape. I was built to be bred. Fed hormones, evaluated every week, measured from ankle to crown. Nothing about what I am was meant to survive this." Oscar looked at her. "And yet you are." Her eyes opened. "You say that like it's strength. But sometimes I think it's just desperation." "Doesn't matter," he said. "Whatever gets you to the next step is what matters. I'm not going to let you burn out now." She looked away. They resumed walking a few minutes later, following the old power line remnants along the ridge. The dockyard wasn't on any active map. It hadn't been used officially in decades, but Oscar remembered the coordinates. A local smuggler named Harvin once owed him a favor after Oscar helped override a failed oxygen regulator in his transport. He just hoped the man hadn't skipped the system. As they reached the crest of the ridge, Oscar raised his hand. "Down." They dropped flat behind a weathered metal slab. Below them, less than 100 meters across the basin, hovered a skiff, black, with blue struts and a visible directorate sigil on the side. A patrol. 2 officers were scanning the ground with handheld arrays. A third paced beside the open hatch. Vari stiffened beside him. Her breathing quickened again. Oscar whispered, "We go wide. Backtrack 30 meters. There's a collapsed well chute. We go under and around." "They're too close," she said. "If they catch us." "They won't." She looked at him. "I'm not fast right now." "Then I'll slow down." They crawled backward, staying low. Oscar took the lead, clearing the path of broken glass and metal splinters. Vari followed close, one hand on her belly, as if shielding it from every jagged corner. Her body was too large for stealth, but she moved with grim precision, every step calculated. They reached the well chute. Oscar pried the lid free. Inside, the tunnel was dark, cool, and lined with slick moss from condensate leaks. It led under the plateau and out beyond the patrol's line of sight. They moved through single file. Vari's breathing grew louder in the silence. Not panicked, but strained. At the far end, Oscar climbed up first. The exit led directly to the outskirts of the dockyard. Half-sunken platforms, rusted pylons, a crumbling tower with a blinking signal beacon. Harvin's skiff sat near the edge, battered, old, but intact. Oscar smiled. "He's here." Vari climbed up behind him, gasping, gripping the edge. But just as they cleared the lip, a voice rang out. "Hold it." They turned, 2 Directorate scouts, weapons drawn, closing fast. Oscar stepped in front of Vari instinctively. "Don't," he barked. "This woman is unarmed. She's pregnant. You want someone? Take me." One officer fired. Not at them, but a warning shot. Dirt exploded near Oscar's foot. "Step aside. The Thaleen female is classified breeding property. She is carrying unauthorized hybrid tissue." Under Section 9 of genetic regulation. I don't give a damn about your regulations. Vari's hand wrapped around Oscar's arm, pulling him back. Oscar, run, he told her. Go to the skiff. I'm not leaving. He turned and shoved her hard toward the dock. Then he moved. Not smart, not strategic, just fast. Oscar lunged toward the first officer, slamming into his rifle, forcing the weapon upward. The second officer aimed, but hesitated, uncertain where to shoot. Oscar took the moment to drive his shoulder into the man's chest, knocking them both into the dirt. A blast rang out. Pain shot through his shoulder, but he stayed on his feet. Then another sound, a low, metallic growl, and Harvin's skiff powered up. Vari had made it aboard. The cargo hatch opened. A low hum built. Harvin's voice echoed from the skiff speaker. You two coming, or should I take off without you? Oscar grabbed the officer's rifle, yanked it free, and fired once into the ground, forcing both patrolmen to retreat. Then he turned and ran. Vari was at the hatch, arm extended, blood on her lip. He leapt. She caught his arm with a grunt and hauled him aboard with a strength born of adrenaline and something far deeper. They collapsed inside the cargo bay as the hatch slammed shut. Engines roared. The skiff tilted up, and then they were rising. Faster. Higher. The planet shrank below them, rust-red, brutal, unforgiving. Vari lay on the floor, chest heaving. She reached for his hand. Gripped it. I thought I lost you, she said. You almost did, he rasped. Her other hand moved to her belly. I didn't want to run before, she said. I didn't think there was anything worth running toward. But now, he leaned over and kissed her, soft, bruised, real. You don't have to run anymore, he whispered. You're free. They didn't say another word as the ship broke orbit. Only the stars watched now. And for the first time, neither of them looked back. The outer colony world of Bressavie came into view like a pale gold disk, half shrouded in soft cloud bands and scattered islands. No patrol ships, no director insignias, no docking queries. Just a tired little station orbiting a tired little planet. Officially labeled a refueling hub, unofficially a quiet place where people disappeared and started over. Oscar sat beside Vari in the jump seat as Harvin's skiff eased into descent. She hadn't said much during the flight. Most of her strength had been spent during the escape. But she hadn't let go of his hand, not once. They touched down outside the central dome, a half-buried facility wrapped in thermal shielding, surrounded by towering moss trees and pale green ferns. Harvin powered the systems down, leaned back, and looked over his shoulder. This is as far as I go, he said. But the medic inside doesn't ask questions. She's good, and I owed you. Oscar nodded, rising to his feet. We're even. Harvin's voice softened slightly. Good luck, Crane. He helped Vari down the ramp slowly. She was unsteady. Her legs moved slow and wide. Her hips aching from days of climbing, crawling, running. But her posture was different now. Upright, no longer hiding the shape of her body beneath a cloak or salvage rags. She walked like someone still healing, but finally seen. The inside of the dome was quiet. Old tech lined the walls, but it was clean, functional. The medic, a middle-aged woman with gray braids and synthetic joints, greeted them with a neutral glance and motion toward the back without speaking. Oscar helped Vari sit on the exam table. The medic took a biometric wand and hovered it over her abdomen. There was a hum, a soft flicker of light, then a flat tone, and a faint rhythm, a heartbeat. Vari's eyes went wide. It's early, the medic said quietly, but it's real. No defects. Mixed genome, but no cellular rejection. Strong signs of fetal attachment. Congratulations. Vari didn't move. She stared at the screen, at the soft flicker pulsing there like a tiny star trying to be born. Her voice shook. They always said I was defective. Oscar moved behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. They were wrong. She nodded once. Then again. Her body trembled, but not from pain. From release. From finally hearing what she'd never been allowed to believe. She was whole. They stayed the night in a small guest pod adjacent to the station. The walls were thin, the lights dim, but there was heat and safety and a bed big enough for both of them. Vari curled up beside Oscar, her head resting over his heart. Her fingers moved lazily over his chest. "What now?" she asked. He thought for a moment. "We register under new names. Move south. There's a settlement along the equator with terraforming needs. I can work the towers again. You can rest. Or not. Up to you. And if someone comes looking, we make sure no one knows where to find us." She looked up at him. "I want a name," she said. "For the child." He smiled. "Already, yes." He stroked her hair. "You pick." Vari thought a long moment, then whispered it. "K." Oscar repeated it softly. "K." Then she added, "And if it's a girl, I want her to have her last name." He didn't answer at first, just held her closer. Finally, he said, "Then she will." They didn't sleep right away. Later that night, she rose from the bed and stood by the window, the faint light of Bress's twin moons casting shadows across her back. Oscar watched her, memorizing the shape of her. Strong shoulders, curved hips, silver white hair falling loose over violet skin. The way she stood now, not like someone cast out, but like someone reborn. She turned to him. "I'm not breeding material, human," she said softly. He smiled. "You're everything." And as the dome lights dimmed and the jungle wind howled faintly outside, Oscar and Vari curled into each other. No longer running, no longer surviving. Just beginning. Together. The wind through the upper canopy of the moss trees whispered like ocean waves. Sunlight streamed in through the dome window in pale amber shafts, cutting across the woven mat where Oscar lay, shirtless, boots off, one arm behind his head, the other reaching across the empty side of the bed. Warmth lingered there. She'd only just gotten up. He sat up slowly, blinking sleep from his eyes. The room smelled faintly of soap, of warm bread, and something herbal, Vari's new tea blend. A gift from the old woman who ran the crop co-op on the southern ridge. She'd taken to blending roots and leaves with almost obsessive focus, saying she liked the way things changed flavor under heat. Oscar stood, ran a hand through his messy hair, and stepped barefoot onto the smooth stone tiles of the bungalow's floor. It wasn't luxury, but it was home. The walls were made of compressed earth panels and green-polished synthwood. The roof curved gently overhead, built from salvaged support struts. Every piece had been laid by hand, their hands. Outside, a soft hum filled the air, TerraVent turbines drawing warmth from the geothermal vents. A field of staggered fans and piping stretched across the rise to the east, each one turning slowly in the early sun. He found her in the garden. Vari stood barefoot on the moss, bent over the root bed, one hand resting on her lower back. She wore a pale wrap that hugged her frame, a cloth tunic Oscar had tailored for her using an old exo fabric kit and his best guess at her measurements. It still clung a little tight at the hips, but she never complained. Her belly was round now. Full. Obvious. 7 weeks since they left Carnix, 7. Oscar stepped outside. The soft green ground gave under his steps. "You should sit," he said gently. Vari glanced back at him. Her silver white hair was tied loosely, the wind catching the edges. She gave him that look, the one that meant, "Don't tell me what to do," human, but softened by the smile she couldn't quite suppress. "I've been sitting too long. Kate kicks more when I'm still." Oscar stepped closer. I don't know," she admitted. "But it feels like a she." He crouched beside her, one hand resting over hers on the curve of her stomach. He could feel the tension beneath her skin, the life inside her responding to his touch. "She's going to be strong," he said. "Like her mother," Vari replied. "And stubborn. Like you." They worked together for a while, quiet, slow. He passed her seed packs and helped carry water from the cistern. She showed him which plants needed trimming, which roots to leave alone. It wasn't technical work, nothing like his former system calibrations or dome atmospheric controls. But it felt honest. They sat under the shade afterward, drinking cool tea from metal mugs. "I never thought I'd have this," she said suddenly. "A place. A roof. No one watching me. Just breathing freely." Oscar didn't respond. He let her speak. She looked down at her hands. "Sometimes I still wake up and think I'm back there. On Carnix. In the salvage pit. And that I imagined all of this. You. Her. You didn't." She looked up. He leaned in, pressing a kiss to her forehead, then her cheek, then her mouth, slow, steady. "You're here," he said, "and we're not going back." Her eyes shimmered. "Even if they come one day, then they'll have to fight me for you." She swallowed hard. Then she smiled again, truly smiled this time. Wide, honest. Her hands cupped his jaw, pulled him closer. They kissed again, deeper. Less about need now, more about belonging. Later, when the sun had reached the edge of the garden wall and the wind carried in the scent of hot soil and ripening fruit, they lay tangled together in the shade. Vari rested on her side, one arm curled beneath her head, her round belly pressed to Oscar's stomach. He drew lazy circles over her hip with his fingertips. "Tell me something," she murmured. "Something I don't know." Oscar thought for a long moment. "I was scared of you the first time I saw you," he admitted. "Not because of your size, because of your silence. You looked like someone who'd forgotten how to be seen. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to look at you and not hurt you more." Her breath caught. Then she nuzzled her face against his shoulder. "You were," she said. "You were exactly strong enough." They stayed like that until the stars returned. And when night fell again, soft, full, peaceful, they lay in their bed beneath the open window, and Vari whispered to the growing child inside her, "You are not a mistake. You're not a project. You're not theirs. You are ours. And I will raise you where no one measures your worth in numbers." Oscar placed his hand over hers, and the baby kicked. Hard. Once. Both of them laughed. Outside, Bress's twin moons rose over the hills, and their home glowed under the quiet hum of life beginning again. Not in chains, not in fear, but in love.